Hello. Welcome to the show about stuff, the Stephen Davis Show.
Welcome to a podcast show about stuff. It's the show about stuff, the Stephen Davis Show. Here's your host, Stephen Davis.
It's time for the show about stuff, the Stephen Davis Show. Oh, that's me. Today, my guest is Jerleen Hollimon-Miller, the former mayor of Maysville, South Carolina, birthplace of her great-grand-aunt, Dr. Mary McLeod Bethune. Aside from starting the annual Dr. Mary McLeod Bethune Legacy Festival, to creating the Mary McLeod Bethune Learning Center, she's a dynamo. Welcome to the broadcast. Wonderful to have you. How are you doing?
I'm doing just great now that I'm here with you today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being part of this broadcast. There are a number of episodes that I've done, but the ones that feel the most closest to me happens to be there's a link in terms of families, in terms of that South Carolina route. So I'm looking forward to talking and learning more about you and about your family background.
Okay.
First thing I want to ask is, tell my audience, where were you born at?
They probably would not even know what I'm talking about. And as I've ran across a lot of people say, where is that? I was born in the town of Maysville, South Carolina. This is the birthplace of Dr. Mary McLeod Bethune. And just as I would tell people this, oh yeah, but where's South Carolina? I thought she was born in North Carolina or someplace else, but it's in South Carolina out of Sumter County. That's what it was back in the day until 1904. That's when it was renamed and designated in Lee County, South Carolina, because of General G.E. Lee. They wanted to carve a piece of history out in his name. So they took a part of Sumter County, they took a part of Kershaw County, and I believe a part of Darlington to name Lee County.
You were born in Maysville.
Mm-hmm.
I would imagine they had a small population there, huh?
Back in the day, I would say wasn't too small. And what's your definition of small? During my generation, we were looking at close to 1,500 folks. Now, Maysville is a cotton town, and they needed laborers to pick cotton. And before I was born back in the 1800s, there were a surmountable amount of people, especially slaves. And from there, it evolved. A lot of the folks that lived out of slavery during the Reconstruction, they found employment elsewhere other than the farm. And they began to migrate to different areas, like different states, New York, Washington, D.C., Florida, and so forth and so on. And naturally, the population started decreasing.
How was it? How far back in your memory do you remember Maysville?
Oh boy, that's a good question. I think I want to go back 50s, I would say. And I was born in the 50s, and it's the latter part of the 50s. And I would make a point that a lot happened then, especially in the town of Maysville. And one thing that was dear to me, the school that my aunt Mary McLeod Bethune attended, it was torn down in 1959. So that left a dent in my heart. And there's a big story behind that, Steve. You wouldn't believe
Well, we got time.
we got time. Are you sure we got time?
As long as we don't take
Oh,
too
okay.
long.
It's a story behind that. Because I think I was no more than 5 years old.
Mm-hmm.
I overheard a conversation that my mom was having with some other lady friends. And they were talking about there were some folks coming in to tear down the school that my Aunt Mary had attended back in the day. Now, my ear wasn't really supposed to be on what they were saying, but somehow I was in the room and I picked it up. And it just made me aware they're about to tear down the school that is supposed to be my aunt's school. So I got on I had a blue bike. I just gotten it that Christmas. And I jumped on the bike and I started riding it up. We lived down a dirt lane. And I rode it down this dirt lane. And I wanted to see these people that was tearing down my aunt's school. Now, I looked around and I didn't see a whole lot of anything happening in the direction where the school was at. And I just kept going back and forth. But little did I know, the folks that was tearing the school down, they were just only like 600 feet away from me at this little candy store that not too far from where the lane was at. They were picking up their lunch. It was a father and the son had seen me come up to the lane, top of the lane several times. And he made mention to his dad that little girl gonna tear that bike down. He's gonna tear it up. And his dad looked at him and said, don't make fun of the little girl. Who knows? One day she could be your wife. Huh?
And
Say
who
what now?
huh?
You say what now?
Yes.
I'm not gonna tell the secret. We're gonna get to that.
Okay.
Because we'll be skipping a lot of things.
Now, the first thing I want to ask you,
Mhm.
Mary McLeod Bethune died in 1955, right?
Correct. Yes.
How much do you remember of her? Did you meet her personally?
No, I did not. I did not. She was close to my dad. I want to say that simply because I remember him saying that when he was a little boy, education was not one of the priority on their list because they had to work the farm. And most time they needed all the children, all the hands that they can get to keep the family livelihood going. My father, she had came back and I think it was in the early part of the 1900s when she just opened up the school and it was called the Normal Industrial Institute for Colored Girls. She had just opened it with 4 children, students, and one being her son, Albert Bethune. And I think shortly after that, she had came to Maysville and she had tried to convince my mother, to allow my father and his brother to come back with her so she could educate them. And I'm going to assume that their father was deceased at this time. That's what I'm going to assume because she needed them because I think she had the 4 boys, 3 boys, and she needed the boys there to stay at home with her. They did not go to Daytona Beach, Florida, back with Mary McLeod Bethune. And I remember him saying he was very proud of her early on because he learned more about her that when she started to school, and I guess they were telling him the story along the way because he remembered it. And he tried to impart it with myself and my younger sister. And it's a story behind that. We would sit on the porch, the front porch, in the evening during the springtime and summer, and he would sit down and tell us the story about his Annie Mary and how you could tell he was very proud of her. He would be glowing from ear to ear. And he would say that she had to walk miles and miles every day so she can get an education. She was very determined to get an education, and she did. And he went to say that she didn't stop there. She went on to be very important. He expressed the part that she was important, that he liked. Just to think someone to come from Maysville, South Carolina, and especially from his family, was important. And he added that she was traveling all over the world. She wanted to help people. He knew what her plight was in life. I could see that in him. And just to hear, now looking back, he was given a Black history moment. And believe it or not, I'm glad I picked up on it. I did. But I don't know how much I picked up on it because it was limited amount of information that was shared in the schools, especially with our Black history. And only thing we could say that she walked 4 miles every day to school from home and 4 miles back from school home. And she was born, she was the first child born out of slavery of 17 children. And naturally, they told about her success and all of her accomplishments.
So there's a whole bunch of you all around. 17 children, huh?
17 children. Now I'm thinking
And your sister was her sister, right?
my sister,
I mean,
my
I'm sorry, your mother
great
was her,
grandmother was her sister,
your
Julia.
grandma was your sister.
Her
And
great
was one of those 17.
She was
So
one of those 7.
you figure at least 10 of those had 2 or 3 children.
True, because I
And
was
then
trying
they
to
had
find out
children.
how many siblings that was with my great grandmother. I only know it was one, and that was my father's father. And his name was Sam. So I don't know of any other than Sam. I've gone to the archives to try to research on that and have come across dead road on that.
There's a gentleman that, let me say it this way. My grandmother's sister
Mhm.
was married to a Bethune.
Okay.
And his grandfather or great grandfather, I think it was grandfather, was the brother of Mary McLeod Bethune's husband.
Okay. Okay.
You know,
Okay. Okay.
you never know how these
You
things,
never.
especially in South Carolina.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm sure other states also, like Louisiana, Arkansas,
Yeah.
but there it was just incestuous.
Exactly. And especially in a small town like Maysville, it's known that everyone are related. And you keep looking at them, are you related to me? And they say, yeah, and they go back and they'll tell you how everything connects, the chain connects. I said, oh, wow. So my father had told us early on when we were growing up, you are not to marry anyone from Maysville.
Okay. Okay. Now, how was the climate in those days? Was Maysville demographics, was it more Black, evenly split, more whites?
Oh, no. Maysville were predominantly Black. The ratio is every bit of 80 to 20 at all times, even now today.
So how did that affect how monies was doled out by the state to municipalities?
Okay, now you got to understand that Maysville is a farm town. It grew cotton, a little tobacco, corn, and wheat, soybeans, and products like that. And the farmers, the funding pretty much was dubbed out to them mostly. And to keep the farm going, there was minimum amount of payouts for the African Americans. On an average day, picking cotton, if you pick 100 pounds of cotton, and that's pretty much was the average. You had to be a good cotton picker to go 200 and 300. Now, my dad could do that. My dad could pick over 300 pounds in a half a day. And that'll bring you back to my aunt, Mary McLeod Bethune. As a child, she picked right at 250 pounds, and she was no more than 7 or 8 years old. 100 pounds would yield $200. And that was probably in the early 60s. In mid 60s, it went to $3. $3. So you had to pay 100 pounds to earn $3.
Now,
And
did you start off school there in Maysville, or did you move someplace else?
yes, I started right at Maysville. It was now renamed Maysville Institute Elementary School. It was when the time that Mary attended was Maysville Industrial Institute School. So they renamed it, I'm thinking, in the latter 60s. I could have been the mid 60s.
How was it going to school?
Oh, okay. We had African American teacher, and going to school, I had to walk because I lived right in the town of Maysville, so it really wasn't bad for me to walk to school with other students. We had teachers that they were teachers that had to do what they had to do. They had two first grade classes, two second grade classes, one third grade, one fourth grade. As you higher, it was only one teacher. But then they started with exchanging classes because they had it now departmentalized. They had science, math, English, history, and so forth when we got to the fifth grade. So we had different teachers to teach the different courses. From Maysville had extended to middle school. And after middle school, we were transferred over to the high school, which was in Sumter County, what Maysville is in Sumter County. And that was like 5 miles from Maysville. So that was high school there. Back in 71, 70, that's the year 70, that's when integration came about. And we moved from our high school over to the white high school. And the high school that we were a part of became the middle school. And from high school, that's the story. As I finished high school, I was ready to start my life. I wanted to go to New York.
In going to having to go to leave your setting and going to a white high school, what was the climate, the attitude of the administration towards these black folk coming to school?
Okay, see, everything was prearranged. That's when the academy and charter schools started coming up. So the white students, they all had transferred from out of their high school into a private school. And it was just probably in my class no more than two whites that were in the class, only because they could not afford the private school. And they were the minority in the entire high school. Weren't that many whites. We are the majority. White teachers were the majority because it kept all of the black teachers over at the middle school. A few of the black teachers were transferred over to the high school, but wasn't a whole lot of differences that I could remember. The transition went about very smoothly because that was my last year. Your senior year, you did not do a whole lot. You just coast through the year. So that wasn't bad. It wasn't bad for me.
Actually, we had some of the same similar experiences, although
Okay.
mine was in a little bit of reverse because my father was a military in Fayetteville, North Carolina,
Okay.
Fort Bragg,
Mm-hmm.
and the high school that I helped to integrate, there were 20, 25, no more than 40 black
Mm-hmm.
students, and there
Oh,
were
okay.
1,500 white students.
Oh, okay. Okay.
It was a difference in terms of how they dealt with it with
Mhm.
us. It was all of a sudden you had all these black students that you never been around, so they're looking at seeing, oh, you know that? Are you that smart?
Mhm.
We didn't
Mhm.
know you all were that smart. And yes, there were the perfunctory fights,
Of
at the
course.
very beginning, and it took a couple of years for it to settle down, where people were accepting that was the way it was. It didn't,
Mhm.
didn't mean that they didn't like it, that they
True.
liked it. It just meant that they wanted to get the hell out, so that they needed to do what they needed to do to get
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
out. That was my experience. My father was in the military, got on military post. It was always integrated.
Sure, sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But moving off post, and I've said this before, the amazing part about that particular period of time was that you had all of these soldiers, but particularly black soldiers, coming to this town, that at the entrance of the town, it said home of the Ku Klux Klan. There was a billboard that said home of the Ku Klux Klan, help stamp out racism, help stamp out integration, communism, and Judaism. And
Interesting.
these folks were going to risk their lives going to Vietnam because that was a way station to Vietnam.
Mhm. Mhm. Interesting. Yes. A
Uh,
subtle message.
what did you particularly focus on in high school?
Mm. Oh, I love to play basketball.
You were a
Yeah.
basketball player?
Oh,
Oh.
yes, I was. Oh, yes, I was. And I, I would take some kind of hostage home with me because I did not play when I got on the floor. Uh, I wasn't a good shooter. I got to say that, but I could rebound and I could guard the ball. I would not let anyone take the ball from me. But I could rebound, I could bring the ball down, I could help the team win. That was my purpose. There were students that scaled me at least 3, 4, 5. I was short, but I had to
You
jump
still
the
are.
ball. Yes, I had to because I could lead. I had that ability. I was good at that. Yeah, I love basketball. I love spelling. I'm good at spelling. Didn't love English that much. History, science was pretty good. Okay. Those was the subject. And I think I liked, there was another subject matter that I liked. I didn't find zoology and botany and all of that was not, chemistry, it was not given, that was not a subject that was given out at my high school. We were a 2A. So there were limited amounts of subject matters that was given at school. So when I enrolled at Claflin University, what college did, I was introduced to a class, a zoology class, and that dealt with dissecting a frog. Oh God. A class filled with students. And when they had all of the frogs in the formaldehyde container, we all had to get our frogs out. I was the only one that got a female frog. To this day, I can remember that. And see, we had to name all the parts of frog. Now, naturally, the male has less part than the female. Oh, oh, Jesus. I said, God's not looking down on me for some reason. I don't know, he's punishing me. But anyway, that was an experience. I got out of class with a B minus. So I didn't do bad.
Oh, that was great. How was your experience at Claflin? I actually was down there in 2018. I had never been to Claflin
Okay,
before,
okay, okay,
but I had gone to a South Carolina State football game,
okay.
and I knew it was right across the street from
From
South
Claflin?
Carolina State.
Yes, indeed. Now, Claflin is the mother of South Carolina State. At least that's what they say. But my experience at Claflin, coming from a cotton town like Maysville, it was an experience. But I have to add and tell you this. It was probably the third day that I was on campus. And I was in the lunchroom in line. I was in line to get my lunch. And freshmen, you got to be indoctrinated and all of that. They know how to take you through a lot of stuff. But for me, I stayed in my room because I was going through still dealing with the passing of my mother. So I was just taking one day at a time. And I missed breakfast. I normally would try to get breakfast since we were freshmen, and they were giving us the first opportunity to get our meal. But this day I missed breakfast. So I had just finished my math class, and it was a little after 12. So I came to the cafeteria. The line was midway, and I came and got on the end, and some fellas came in the cafeteria, and a lot of them just started cutting. So that meant I had to go back, and I wasn't liking it. My mind was going to say, a better way y'all can do this, get behind me. But I said, no, I just leaned on the wall and waited my turn till I came up to the door. So this guy came, he was long with them, but he did not cut. He waited until I came up, and he said, you mind I cut in front of you? And I told him, I guess you can. All the others have, you might as well. So he came, he stood in front of me, and he said, my name is Ed Miller. What is your name? I said, Jerleen Miller. He said, Jerleen Miller, pleased to meet you. Where are you from? I said, Maysville, South Carolina. So he paused. Then he said, I've been to that little town. He said that my dad and we tore down the school in that little town. Now, mind you, I was riding up and down our land so I could find these people that was tearing down my aunt's school, and I was going to give them a piece of my mind. No joke. I was going to chase them out of Maysville, but it was how many years later? At least 12, 13 years later, that's when I met Ed.
That's a great story.
It's a great story. I gave him a piece of my mind. And a year later, we got married.
Now you cannot tell me that he scoped you out and decided to wait until you were further to come over to you. That was a way of being introduced to you.
That's what he did. That's exactly what he did.
Now I want to do two things.
Okay.
Before I ask the next question, and tell me about your mother and your father. Those are the two things. Because I failed to ask you that at the very beginning, and I want to know where you come from.
Okay. My mother, she was a Carolina. She was very docile, very homey-like. She stressed education. She was more of the nurturing type. She stayed home with us and made sure we were fed, made sure that we were dressed. But she was a type of person that outdressed all of us. She could not go to town Friday, Saturday without buying her something. She was a type of person had to have something new to wear on Sunday when she attended church. She was one of these persons that you would say, the uppity type of person. I don't think any of us, she was uppity. She came from a aristocratic side of the family. And how that happened, I don't know. But
what was her maiden name?
Carolina. Carolina. And
I thought you meant she was from Carolina. I'm saying,
no,
Carolina.
she was a Carolina.
Okay.
Yeah, and everything had to be properly in its place. We had to clean the house every day, rake the yard. Being next to the youngest, I didn't have to do a whole lot. I just stay, I just look and squeal on the rest of them. But that was my mom.
Okay.
She was very caring. My father, he was the breadwinner of the family, and you would know that. And he did not take anything from anyone. He was he was a hard worker. I think he was the supervisor over his job. He worked the field, like I told you in the beginning, he could work part-time on Saturday to buy our books and clothes and what have you. That's what he would do in the cotton fields. He would do that every Saturday because he worked at a manufacturer. No, first he worked on the railroad. He did put those towels and stuff, whatever they call them, on the
Bikes.
tracks. Yeah.
Bikes.
Yes, he did all of that. His problem was they had to let him go. He suffered with hypertension and he had it real badly. So they had to let him go. So he was able to find a job at Georgia Specific. It was a furniture store company, and they made furnitures there. And they hired him as a supervisor. And on Saturdays, he would be a taxi cab to the locals. He would take them to and fro to Sumter and charge them. But he always came back home at 12 to 1 o'clock because he had to take the family to Sumter, to town, until we got old enough to start driving. And so he didn't have to really take care of us in that instance, only when he had to. But he was a unique man and he could scuffle. When I say scuffle, the men around town, they would say, my dad was no more than 5'1", 2", but he was bow-legged and he was brawny. He was built. And they would say that if he were to throw you, if he pinned you down, you were down. Quite a fella.
Now, there's no proof whatsoever,
Uh-huh.
but I would imagine that your parents probably knew some of my grandmother's, at least one of my grandmother's sisters. I don't know which one. I think is the one that married Bethune, but they had a club in Sumter.
Okay.
And
Okay.
my grandmother and some of the others, when they were ready to leave Vance, they moved up to Sumter to work in that, whatever they called it.
Yes.
uh, before they began spreading out to other places.
Right. Yes.
uh, but I would imagine that your family, your mother and father probably came in the club, whatever club it was.
They didn't so much hung out that way. My mother, she was more like a homebound person. And if they were to socialize, it would be with some of their friends. They would go to their homes and stuff. My dad, he was more like a quiet person. When he did whatever he did, it was only with one or two people, and they would congregate on the inner town up against the railroad track.
Okay.
And that's about the extent of it. And they were drinking their juice or what have you, and that was between them and no one else.
Now, a, a question that I have going back to your days at Claflin,
Mm-hmm.
were you in when they had the whole thing on about Orangeburg at South Carolina? Was it South Carolina State that
It
they
was South Carolina State. No, I was
you
not
were
at Claflin then. No,
it already happened by the
it
time
had. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Claflin happened. For
I,
my audience, they had a incident where state troopers fired on some students from South Carolina State
mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
killed three of them.
Okay.
Did they ever
I'm a
get, did they ever get prosecuted?
I dropped the ball in learning more about that. They got different monuments and things erected in honor of them. But it's hard to say.
Mm-hmm.
And if I were to just think of it, most times folks commit a crime and go without being punished. That's nothing new, especially in South Carolina. I don't know. I really have
Okay.
to say I don't know. Yes.
All right. Now you hurtled towards graduation at Claflin.
No, I didn't graduate from Claflin.
You didn't graduate from Claflin?
No, I was there till my senior year, first semester. And Ed and I we had, poof, we've gotten, but Ed he went into the Air Force. So while he was there in the Air Force, I was pregnant with our first son. And I guess I was like 2, 3 months pregnant. And he was away off in Texas, San Antonio, Texas. And I had to, I, I, I took sick and I had to come home. I went back to school, but I couldn't muster it. It got me into San Antonio, Texas. So I left school and I went to San Antonio, Texas, and we were there until he finished his tour there. And when he finished his tour there, we went to Mississippi, Biloxi, Mississippi. And we were there for, I think, 2 years. And that was not, we were really contained there on base. We couldn't go on the outside of whatever were happening during that time. There was a lot happening, of course, and we were pretty much contained on base. We were there for around 2 years, and then after Biloxi, he had his tour there at Warner Robins Air Force Base, and we were there for 2 years. And that's when our second son was born. And first son was born in Biloxi, Mississippi, and the second one was born in Warner Robins, Georgia. So we was there for 2 years. So he had a tour for 4 years. He'll tell you 1 month, 2 weeks, and 1 day and 24 hours or something like that. He good in saying how long he stayed in the service. And he wanted to go, we were going to remain there and probably make it a career. And they were going to send us to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And we had took a ride there to scope out the place, and we stayed there for around about a week. Things didn't turn out. You thought things was one way, but the report went another way. I think they said Ed was lackadaisical or something like that. They didn't see whatever. I'm just talking out of school, and I know I shouldn't, but that was a bad report that they gave. And Ed did not like it because I thought he was very sociable. Ed is a very sociable person. Something have to be wrong with you not to like Ed.
Was he an
Ed,
officer?
Ed was an officer.
So
He went to, huh?
that would explain some of the stuff in
Yeah,
terms of that, because there weren't too many officers that were black.
true. There
And
weren't.
and those that were officers had a hell of a time, because you're talking about leadership of the army, and that they didn't want that. And in some ways you can history repeats itself because they're doing the same thing today.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But we managed to make the decision that we'll just leave the military and find another career. So we left Warner Robins, Georgia, heading to New York City.
The Big Apple.
The Big Apple. The Big
And
Apple.
where, and where did you move to in the city? Is that where you went straight to Jersey, or you moved to New York City first?
No, we went to New York City. I'm basically all my family. I migrated to the city. And so we moved in with one of my sisters, and we stayed there until we could get on our feet. And then we got an apartment, and that was on the east side of 106th Street at a co-op. We were there until
106th Street and where?
on 106th Street Franklin Plaza. It was a co-op. So we was there for X amount of years until our youngest son, he declared that he was going to get a dog. He wanted a puppy. He slipped a baby puppy in the apartment. I'm afraid of dogs. I'm afraid of cats too. But he slipped this animal in the apartment. And oh God, I don't know. I thought I was going to die. But anyway, his grades were not the best. So we negotiated that if he were to bring up his grade, we would think about getting him a dog. And he was much smarter than Ed and I. His grades, he was able to change the grades himself. He changed a D to a B, an F to an A. Oh, the kid was smart. It was smart. So when he did that, I told Ed, we said, we can't bring a dog here in the apartment. We're just going to have to buy a house. So that's what happened. We bought a house in New Jersey. And we stayed there, and he got his dog. Matter of fact, he had 2 to 3 dogs at different times, naturally. And then it came to the point that it was his senior year. Time for him to go. He had too many dogs. It's time for him to go. So we decided that we'll ship him out, and we brought him to South Carolina, and we put him at Claflin College. So he attended Claflin College, and we left him. Him and his dog. We left him and his dog. And he turned out to be a very good son. Both of our children, they both the oldest one, he graduated from South Carolina State. He didn't quite made it cum laude, but he was close to that. The youngest one, he did. He graduated from Claflin University now. And he did made cum laude. So we're proud of him. He turned his life around. So that was a good thing. He got away from the dogs for a spell, but then he came back into the dog. But now he is away from the dog. So I can go to his house now and feel comfortable.
Are those the only 2 siblings you have?
And we
you
have
want a girl?
I did, but it wasn't in my cards. And I knew that. No. I would let them have the girls. We have 5 grands, 2 girls and 3 boys. Two of them, the 2 older ones, are in the Navy. The third one he just graduated from College of Charleston. I'm probably not saying it all that correct, but he graduated last year. We were hoping that he would have made pro, but the cards were not in his favor. He had a lot of pro teams that looked him over, but it didn't pan out. So he's now in Atlanta, Georgia. He's thinking now what he's wanted to do further with going to grad school. So he's going to take a hiatus for a year, and then he's going to start up with his grad studies.
That sounds very promising, very promising. Now tell me about your work experiences. I know that you are from South Carolina, and Ed Miller snuck up on you and got in front of you, and then you got married a year later. But tell me about your experiences in the workplace.
Okay. So when we moved to New York, I finally decided I was going to complete my education. I went to City College and I graduated, picked up my master's in early childhood education. I thought I wanted to teach. I did for 5 years. And it was in a Montessori environment. And then I realized, oh, it's not for me. So at that time, Ed was starting up a new business and was an oil company. So he came up with South Carolina Heating Fuel. So naturally, in the beginning, things was falling in place, customers and what have you. And most of the folks that lived in Harlem, they were from South Carolina or North Carolina, from the southern states. And that's all you have to say, South Carolina Heating Fuel. So the customers just migrated over to us. So the all business was doing very good. And we worked 24 hours a day. And all the rest we had was on Sunday, and we didn't have it then because we had to come to church on Sunday in New York City at Mount Nebo Baptist Church. But it all went well. It was life. And everything is a learning, growing pain, raising children, having a young marriage. Well, we were already 16 years into the business. But everything we had to take everything in grace. And we lived, I think it was 9 years we stayed in Jersey, Hazlitt, New Jersey. And then one night, and it was back in 1989. That's the year, it was September the 22nd. That's the time the hurricane was told, they said the Hugo hurricane was going to hit South Carolina. And I had two sisters living in the Somerville area. And they said the hurricane was going to impact Charleston, Somerville, and some of the other nearby towns and cities. And I had called my sisters, and I told them that they might as well come up and they could spend time with us in Jersey. Oh no, they're not coming. It's not going to be a hurricane, they said. They've heard that before, and just had to be a little wind blowing, and that was it. Sure enough, Hurricane Hugo hit them and devastated them all and devastated them. But that night I woke up and I wrote on a tissue paper the story of the mighty Hugo Comes to town. And it just came to me, the story revealed itself, and I was just writing it as it came to me. And I told that morning, I took it from the paper, the tissue paper, and I put it on a regular paper, and I said, Ed, read this and tell me what you think. So he read it, and he said, I think you got something. Mm-hmm. Really? You sure? Yeah, I think you got something. But he said, let's see whether someone else feel the same way. Our next door neighbor, we had lived in a predominantly white community. I wanted to expose the kids to the other side so they'll know how to be able to handle themselves. I didn't know, you really didn't know what you were doing, but you say, let's take them out of the box that they were in and let's expose them to more of what America is like. It was a predominantly white community that we lived in, Jewish. The next door neighbor, they were very friendly. The next door neighbor had told us there was an that worked at the Random House, and he lived like 2 blocks down from us. We asked them, could they take this? It was just on the paper now with some drawings that my youngest son did, and we asked them would they take it, just give us some feedback, and they did. They took it to him, and we didn't talk to him directly. They came back with what he said, that it was a good story, children's story, but the way Random House worked, they would publish the book, but I would have to sign a contract that I would be responsible of writing 9 more books of the same caliber. And like I said, that was a fluke because that was a hurricane, and that came by way of a dream. Okay, and I didn't expect just that book, and that was all that I expected. So we thought about it, we mulled over it, and we said we had to save a few pennies, and we said, why don't we self-publish this book? So we said, let's see how much it's going to cost. So we researched that and found out that we could, in fact, publish it and take us back a couple of $1,000 or so. And that's what we did. We published the book. But before we had the book published, is another story I meant to tell you. We came down to King Street, where Ed is from, and we just stopped by the superintendent's office. And we gave him the same little paper manuscript that I had. He read it and he said, "When are you going to publish the book?" We said, "We're taking it now to be published." So he said, "Okay, I will buy some of the books for our district." So we came back to New York. I think a month later, he sent a check. I think it was either 1,000 or 2,000. I just can't remember right now. And here, Ed and I look at each other. What are we going to do? Now, we told him that we were going to have the book published. It was really soon to be published, but we weren't there yet. But then we started putting different pieces in place, and we found this publishing company out of Jersey. I think it was close to, I forgot now, Trenton, New Jersey. We gone there, and they had the book published overseas. And it came back. I think, in October. It could have been September, October. But at this time, the superintendent had wanted the books the first day of school reopening so we could pass them out to the students. And we did not meet the deadline. So he said he wasn't upset, but he pretended to be upset. And he said, "I will accept your apologies, but you would have to come and deliver all the books out to the students." So that was a fair exchange. Ed and I, we got on our little jolly little bus and we ran down to King Street and we went to every one of the schools and we gave all the books out. And we came back and we told him what had happened. When we sat down with him, he gave us a list of all of his superintendent friends, principals, and everyone in the state of South Carolina, and he called them all, and he wanted me to visit all of their schools. That's how we wound up staying here in South Carolina.
See, you got ahead of me because I was going to ask, how did you get back to South Carolina? Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's how we
Answer
wound up.
that question for me.
Okay, that's how we came back. We stayed here because of the Mighty Hugo Comes to town. It kept us pretty
No, no, no,
busy.
no.
Mhm.
Why did you, if Random House wanted you to do 10 books,
Mhm.
why did you all reject that? What was behind the offer that you could not go with?
Simply because I didn't think my mind was not there. That meant that I would have to dedicate all of my time and energy to that project. So I wasn't really there yet. And I didn't think I could get there in the time frame that they wanted me to be at. So I said, let's do it at my pace that I would be comfortable with. So that's why we decided to be self-publishers. And that's the way we went. And I was happy with that. I was happy with that. And it wasn't a bad journey for us. Covered the Eastern Shore. We went as far as Mississippi. Hugo was all around. It took us to places we've never been before.
Great. Now, was that your only book or you followed it up with other books?
I did after doing the same time as Hugo, and I came to my birthplace, which is Maysville, and the mayor being a Black mayor and family, because he was married to my mother's cousin. That was his first wife. He invited Ed and I back home, and it was during Christmas time, and he wanted us to be a part of the Christmas parade. And he asked that we be the Grand Marshal, and we accepted it. Okay, we come, and he wanted to introduce me to the NCNW, which would be at the homestead of the McLeod family. And he introduced to all of the officers and members and what have you. And we felt everything was, I'm back at home. And coming back home looked like nothing was the same anymore. The town was a desolate place. It was a dead town. And with all the travelings that Ed and I have done, I've been to so many churches and did a display and presentation of Hugo. And we met this very friendly minister. He was a young guy minister, and I'm sorry I said guy, but a young minister. And he said, your little town is dying. And he said, what you need to do is write a grant. You know how to write a grant? No, I don't know how to write a grant. He said, I can write a grant for you, and whether you can bring that little town back to life. His name was, oh God, I remember his name. I don't remember it now. Brown, Reverend Brown.
R.L. Brown?
No.
Ralph Brown?
Not Brown, I forgot the first name. But his church was in Long Star. That's right off from, not far from St. Matthew. It's out in the rural part of the county. It was so rural, I think the next house you would see was like 5 or 6 miles and probably 10 miles away. That's how far the church was there. But anyway, we visited him at the church and he was trying to write the grant for us. And it was a beautification grant. It would be a nature trail. And that's what we came up with. And we would name this nature trail the Mary McLeod Bethune Nature Trail. And he started with the proposal. And I think the time ran out on him and he only presented one packet. It was supposed to have, I think, 5 or 6 packets and he only had one. So the grant was not approved. Okay, so I decided the next time I'm going to try it. I'm going to take what he had and try to dress it up a little bit and then have the 6 packet to go along with it. And it was denied the second time. The third time, this white man that reviewed the grants as they were, the proposal of the application as they were submitted, he came out to the town of Maysville and he said, sit down. I'm going to tell you what you're missing and what all you need to have with your packet. And I need to tell you is that the reason why you were denied on the twice was because they only allot X amount of grants in a given year, but it would roll over they're only going to give out, for instance, 5, and it would roll over after, they would give you $1 million, and after the $1 million, in 5 years or what have you, after the $1 million, you cannot reapply. And they will allow another applicant to slide in that slot. And he explained it to the point that he was saying, submit your application, do this and do that, and you'll be granted the money. And sure enough, the next time we were granted $200,000, and we would have been receiving the $200,000 in 200 allotment every year until our project was complete, until we got $1 million. We got it, the $200,000, and here we're going to do the nature trail. Everything was moving along smoothly until the mayor, him and the clerk decided they want to change things. They wanted the nature trail, the proposal was to go for 1.5 miles one way and come back. And the reason that was the case is that there was detour bridge that was owned by the state or the federal, but they had to, when the detour bridge was closed, it belonged to the federal or the state. It could have been the state. And there were funds left over. And I was told by the man that came out to Maysville that the nature trail would have to butt up to that bridge. And then the town will not have to pay a match. So we wrote the grant accordingly and tried to explain this to the folks. They could not comprehend it. So they decided they were going to change everything. And so the project did not, the funding was awarded back in 2004. We did not get the bridge erected until 2007. I'm thinking it was 2008. And the reason at that time, 2005, I had decided I was going to run for city councilman, for the city council. It was a seat vacant. What happened there was I wasn't going to run. The mayor had found out that I was writing these grants, and he saw an opportunity to get me on council. So he said, okay, I will appoint you on council. You don't have to run. But then he went back and found out that, okay, he started talking to some other folks, and they said, no, let her run for the position against this person, and then we'll appoint another person to the seat that was vacant. And I said, that's not going to work. And I wasn't living in Maysville now. I was living in Orangeburg at the time because both of our children, they were in one was at Claflin, and the other one was at State. So we all were living in Orangeburg. And when they came up with that, we decided, okay, if that's not going to happen, he's not going to appoint me on the council, I wasn't going to run. But things got a little murky. So I decided, okay, then that kind of pushed me on my back to the wall. I'm going to run. So I ran for the council and I won. And I won the seat for 2 years. Now, this is when now the nature trail and the grant being awarded. And here now they wanted to change things. That's when I decided I was going to run for mayor. Because that's the only way. This would be the only way that I could get the nature trail built, because he wasn't going to build it the way it was supposed to be. And here they were saying that we're strangers in the town of Maysville, and we'll be spending the town's money because it required a match. And that's when I was telling them, no, it did not require a match, simply because the nature trail would butt up on that detour bridge. But they couldn't comprehend that. So that's the reason why I ran for the mayor.
And did you win that first time?
I most certainly did. A landslide? No.
At a mayor.
A landslide? I did. Well, no, it was some little kinks in there, but yes, I won.
And you got the nature trail built.
The nature trail was
the way
built.
it's supposed to be built.
Yes, yes. And it's a beautiful nature trail.
Aside from doing the nature trail, what was your focus for your administration?
Gosh, I had so much on my plate. I came in, I had the seniors. It was a lot of my supporters were seniors from the age of 60 plus. They came out in groves. You had disability folks that were amputees. They were blind folks, folks all kind of disability. And they came out in groves and elected me as the mayor. So my focus was mainly on them. I wanted to give back to them. Like I said, Maysville is a cotton town with primarily a lot of the stigma of the thinking of we cannot do anything by ourselves. We have to rely on others. And nothing wrong with that. That's fine. But you got to make an effort to see how much you can accomplish by yourself. Ed and I had met some, oh my God, some dynamic folks. You wouldn't believe it. Black, white, all colors. That the minute that I mentioned Mary McLeod Bethune, they rolled up their sleeves and they were telling me how much money I could get from this place, that place, and so forth and so on. Mr. Trulock, he's the one that said, I'm going to give you $1 million. And he said, you just keep doing what you're doing. So many folks. And so that just blew my head. I said, well, then we can do this and we can do that. That's what I was thinking. But I realized all of my seniors, their time basically was coming to an end. I didn't have the seniors. They were dying like, I don't know, look like every day they were dying. But my focus then, I had moved from the seniors, and I said, let me see where the young folks are at. And I focused on the young folks, and I realized the young folks in the town, they were, how would you say, they weren't natives of the town of Maysville. They were transients that came in temporarily for a month, 2, 3, 4, 5, then moved out someplace else. And wasn't a whole lot of young. We are talking now like 30-year-olds to 40s, 50s, 60s, basically, of African Americans. And we are like 80%, the ratio 80 to 20. That's the demographics here in Maysville. And I realized, okay, there's things that we can do. And I was able to get X amount of grants. I started writing grants, but got X amount of grants from different agencies. They helped with the grants. It's so many grants that I received during my tenure for this and that and what have you, for sewer, for water hydrant, to a HUD grant to do 4 apartments. But I was the mayor for 4 years, the first term. And we got a HUD grant. We applied for this HUD grant. And as we applied for it, it was set up similar to this beautification grant. You had to move entity out in order to slide another entity in. But no one mentioned that. But this grant was a HUD grant for 8 apartments, a commercial space, and some other things. And it was they were going to renovate an old hotel by the name of Canine Hotel. Now, that was one of the grandeur building here in the town of Maysville. It had one of these spiral staircase that went up. It was a beautiful structure back in the day, but now it was on its last leg. It was almost gone. But they were going to renovate that and put 8 apartments, commercial space, and other things in there. And finding out a lot happened. It did not work, but they thought they could have get it done. And that's the reason why I was defeated for my second term as mayor. And it didn't happen. It found out there was a lot to it than meet the eyes. 4 years came back in 2015 in November. A lot of folks was knocking on the doors and they were saying, we need you back. We want you to run. And I said, no, I'm happy doing what I'm doing, whatever that was. No, we got to get things back to where it was. I said things would never get back to where it was. That meant a lot of folks that we knew, they have moved on one way or the other. And I meant that I would have to start back from scratch. I didn't have the energy to do it. They say, we'll help you. I said, I'm not going to work to get elected. If y'all want me reelected, y'all going to have to prove it to me. So back in November 2015, I ran again and I was elected as the mayor the second term. And okay, I hit the ground running. Okay. They were able to, in the interim, Ed and we had gotten $315,000 that was in an appropriation from the state to build a museum for Mary McLeod Bethune. Ed and I did not have our 501c3. That was when we first came here, and that was in 1999. But a friend of ours, like I said, was a lot of good folks that we met. He was a senator, and he said he was out of Columbia. His name was Senator Johnson. He was a representative then, but he later became a senator. And he said, you have nothing in that small town? I'm going to help you build a center, and I'm going to put money in the budget for you. It was a lot that happened, transpired during that time when he put the money in the budget, but we wound up winning the award of $315,000. But Ed and I did not have a 501c, so we had asked the mayor at that time, can we use his 501c3, which was the Maysville Ed and Industrial Institute that was founded by Emma Jane Wilson, Dr. Bethune's first teacher, and that was back in 1884. That's how long that 501c3 extended back. And he said that we could use it, and he would be the overseer. The 501c would be the overseer over the funds. So everything panned out okay. Now, in order to we bought properties, about 10 acres and 52 acres, because we were going to do a lot of things. And the economy crashed. Everything went haywire. Couldn't find no money. For several years, we just had to just wait it out. The money just stayed in the bank. Nothing we can do with it. We tried to see whether we could find an investor, all kinds of means. We couldn't do anything. So we just left the money in the bank. And in 2000, and I think 2014, I was no longer the mayor. They had a mayor then that decided, the mayor that had the money in the 501c3, he decided then that the money was, we had awarded this money for so long, the state was going to take the money back. So he decided now that he would take the money and give it to the town. And so the town would invest in doing one of the buildings that we would let you see, but it's over. The town is renting it, using it now. The town is utilizing it now. And this is called the Mary McLeod Bethune Learning Center and Art Gallery. So he decided that he'll give the town the money. So they renovated the building next door, and that building has been around renovated since 2014-15. And I came back 2015. So they didn't have anything in the building no more than some computers and tables. And basically that was it. I said, since I can't do my museum for Mary McLeod Bethune and the McLeod family, I'm going to turn this into a museum. Okay. I asked my senator for some money. Now, I asked him for $500,000. I only got $100,000. I couldn't do what I wanted to do with it. I realized, okay, what would Mary McLeod Bethune do if she was in my shoe? And I said, our kids need to know the history of South Carolina and some of the African Americans that look like them, that had excelled to excellency right from South Carolina. Didn't have much. They worked in the cotton field, tobacco field, and lived in the country, in rural counties and stuff. I said, I think they need to see a reflection of themselves so they learn something. I turned the Learning Center Art Gallery into Distinguished South Carolinians. So that's what the center next door is about. And one room I dedicated it to the McLeod family. So I have stories that reflect the McLeod family with arts and what have you in a room there. And here, the next year, I say, since he was so gracious to give me $100,000, I'm still going to plug in and ask him for $500,000 again. So I asked him for $500,000. He gave me $150,000. But naturally, HUD had came through because I changed everything. And we couldn't do the Canadian Hotel. Like I said, there was a lot of politics going on over there. So I decided, okay, I got this Bland building. We can renovate this Bland building and have some things here that we can be proud of being Maysvillians. So I said, I'm going to tell the history of Maysville. So I did my research. And I started discovering things that I have never been told. It was not in the books, information that was hidden. I found so much resources that I said, I have to tell the story. And I went back from 1861, and that's when the founder, the second founder of the town of Maysville came, but he came in 1821. So he came to set up his dynasty here in Maysville. His name was Matthew Peterson. This is called the Maysville Historic Museum. And we are located here on at 37 North Main Street. And I was telling you all about Matthew Peterson Mays. This is a portrait of him. He came from Virginia, state of Virginia, in I think 1820, and he decided to set up house here in the town of Maysville. The town of Maysville was at that time called Bradleyville. That was something I never knew about. I always knew the town as being Maysville. But anyway, he had a plantation. The plantation was named Mudrow Plantation. And I think he had, they said 300 slaves, but that's what was recorded. But I'm quite sure there were much more slaves than 300 because he had over 3,000 acres of cotton and other products that he harvested and produced. As you can see, this is a sign that comes in when you come into the town of Maysville. If you can see it, let me see right today. Did I pass it? No. Oh, those are the slaves. I wanted to do a replica of the slaves that was on the plantation. And okay, there's the sign that says the town of Maysville. We had a train depot. And the train depot is where Mary took her first trip, her train ride out of Maysville, going to Nova Scotia back in the late 80s, 1800s. And this is Salem Black River Presbyterian Church. This is where Matthew Peterson Mays, this is where he attended on Sundays. This is a plantation home right here called Rip Rap houses. This is right off of 527. And this is another plantation home. This is the one that you would see here. This is one of the antebellum homes here in Maysville. And this is the Hines resident of Mays family. This is where they live. This is, you would see here, our Supreme Court Justice Finney. He's not a native of South Carolina, but he made South Carolina his home. And he served the state of South Carolina in a way that we would be very proud of him serving as a Supreme Court Justice. This is a revival meeting at a church, storefront church, and wanted to depict that because that was a part of our history. During the summer months, they had revival meetings. This is two of the schools, three of the schools here in and around the town of Maysville. One was called Goodwill Parochial. The other one was Howard Chapel College School. And this is the Maysville Industrial Institute right here. It's the one that Dr. Mary McLeod Bethune attended. And down here, you would see one of the bricks that we founded on the site. So we have that on display. May Day was a big thing in elementary school, especially in Maysville. And wanted to depict that. That was a time that we really didn't know the purpose of May Day. We just thought it was a day that they gave us off, and we just had hot dogs and had a day just to play like we were playing midgets and the band and stuff, and didn't know how to do that, but that's what we played around. And here is where the Whites High School here in Maysville, and this is one of their baseball teams. And this is another white school that was out in the rural area. And I really didn't know about this during the time that I grew up in Maysville. Found that out later. And this is a display here of some injustice that took place in the town of Maysville. And this is another one, not necessarily in Maysville, but in the nearby county, which is Clarendon. It was a young 14-year-old boy, African American boy, that was accused of raping two white young girls, that was executed within 7 days. And the gentleman by the name of George E. Friesen, he got him exonerated after 40 some years. And they found the culprit that killed the two young girls. And here is Martin Luther King Jr. He was in King Street, South Carolina. And that was back in 1966. And the reason why he's displayed here in the museum is because my father and other men from our church here in Maysville, folks from all over South Carolina, they were there on that day in King Street to hear Reverend Martin Luther King speak. Folks, you could not even get close. There were so many African Americans there.
That's
And
wonderful.
okay, tell me if you want me to stop.
Actually, I want to go into the last phase of it.
Okay.
It has to do with what you plan on doing. What are you doing now, and what are your plans for the future?
That's a good question. What am I doing now? We have a medical clinic here in this facility, along with the deli, but mainly a medical clinic. And I want to get that up and active. So right now we are working with some folks in the city of New York. They have opened up a new clinic on 144th Street and Lenox Avenue. So we're working with him, and we're trying to collaborate with him so that we could, in fact, be able to open the clinic. Because see, we are in the advanced state of the art of medicine, and using equipments that you do not have to go to the emergency room, you do not have to go to the doctor's office. You can stay at home and you can bring the equipment to your patients. And this equipment is called the doc. It looks like a robot, and it is the state of the art. It can read all your vital signs. They have different scopes and different things. It's modern technology. So we've been delving in that a little bit, learning all of what we can bring here to Maysville. And hopefully we can put all of that here in our medical clinic. I have the med doc. I do have that here. But now we're trying to make it available to as many people as possible. That's where we're at now today. My mind now have gone to I want to do indoor track and field. We are missing that and in the area. And this is something that is definitely needed for our children. This is where they're at today. I understand sports is not education, but the two
Sports is
goes hand in
education.
hand. So I'm
Sports,
thinking about that.
sports is education. It teaches you
Exactly.
how to deal with other people, how you can work together towards a common goal.
Yes,
Mm,
absolutely.
that's
The
a very
both of them go
important
hand in
part.
hand. Yes,
They go hand in hand.
right.
I thank you so much for the tour. This was a wonderful conversation. And I want to close by saying I was founded and I was the president of a organization here in New York that was a citywide organization called the African American Leadership Summit. I had politicians, healthcare leaders, criminal justice leaders, just different parts of the discipline that we need to improve within our community. And one of the members of it was the principal of a junior high school in New York, in Brooklyn, actually. And we adopted that school. And I actually had an office in that school, and the school was named Mary McLeod Bethune School.
Okay. All right.
So I thank you so much for this wonderful episode. That's it for the show about stuff, the Stephen Davis Show. I'll be back next week.
Thank you for tuning in this week. Hope you enjoyed this show about stuff. See you next time.